My name is Nick Mitchell. I'm a territory manager out here in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So today we're going to be focusing on keeping your landscape bed and lawn free of weeds. So kind of the agenda I'm going to do, I guess I didn't realize Mike was going to do a little introduction about myself, but I'll just run through briefly about myself as well. Why do we value turfgrass management? Understanding those weeds or pests with identification tools and kind of life cycles, and then effective strategies for weed-free landscape beds and turf. So like you said, I'm originally from Nebraska, so new to the East Coast now. So I graduated from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln with my turfgrass and landscape management major. Did a few internships on different golf courses out in Jackson, Wyoming for a few summers. So kind of have some of that hands-on experience as well. After my undergrad, I got approached to go to grad school. I thought this idea was crazy. I was tired of school, but had a few professors and some other influential people recommend go to grad school. So got the opportunity to go to Kansas State University under Dr. Jared Hoyle, where I really focused in on weed science. So the weed I really dove into is a perennial weed called windmill grass, where we were purely just trying to figure out what products could provide control to this weed. After that, got the opportunity to start my professional career with Teva Agriscience, or what used to be known as Dow Agriscience. So started in 2020 as a trainee in Indianapolis at our Global Business Center. Within some movements that have gone on in the turf division, the Pennsylvania, New Jersey territory became open. So I was all aboard and took advantage of a great opportunity. So just a little bit about me and a little bit of background. So dive into the presentation on why you guys are here. So why do we maintain turf grass? There's several different reasons we do this, starting with erosion control, reduces dust, air, increases property values, as well as those playing surfaces when we look at golf courses, as well as it does reduce injuries on the sports fields. When you look at baseball fields or football fields, when you're talking about natural grass. So kind of going a little further in depth with some numbers on why we do maintain turf grass is the average front lawn of 8 homes has a cooling effect of about 70 tons of air conditioning. Soil and water protection. A healthy lawn absorbs rainfall and reduces runoff up to 80 times more than previous surfaces such as driveways, sidewalks, and parking lots. And lastly, like I mentioned before, studies have shown that aesthetically pleasing landscapes, including turf grass, contribute up to 15% of home value properties. So kind of just a little deeper on why do we actually care to maintain turf and landscape beds as well. So now we're going to dive into how do we go about the identification classes of weeds as well as the different life cycles. So when we look at weeds, there's really 3 main groups. You have grasses, you have broadleaves, and then you have sedges. As you can see, grasses have these identification that are kind of giveaways when trying to identify them, as well as broadleaves also have that, generally broader, not always, but sometimes contain a taproot. And lastly, sedges. I remember during my undergrad classes is sedges always have edges. It's a dead giveaway. That's how you know it's a sedge. Roll it in your fingers, it has edges, so that's how you know it's a sedge. So what technically is a weed? Kind of an interesting thought if you really think about it. Some people may consider turf grass a weed, I don't know. But a weed is any plant out of place. So a weed really fights for that sun, that water, those the nutrition benefits in the soil, whether it's in a landscape bed from those plants that you're growing or trees or even in your turf. It really fights for the same things that your turf's looking for as well. The interesting thing about weeds, the seeds are very viable for decades. I know there's certain weeds out there that once you get that seed in the soil, that seed bank lives and is there forever, so seeds will always be there. It also just adds to maintenance and cost to manage. A cool saying that I always like is weeds in turf are often due to poor quality turf, but not the cause of poor quality turf. So as you all know, thick, dense turf and lawns are often weed-free, but those poorly maintained lawns often have a lot of weeds. So the best answer to keeping a weed-free lawn is a thick, dense turf. So what is a weed? Let's kind of look at some of the life cycles out there. Annual and perennial are pretty much the main two we'll cover, with annuals having both summer annuals and winter annuals, and we will be going into some of those, the differences and some of the main ones that we are familiar with. It's very important to know what your weed is in order to make the proper application with a pre-emergent or even a post-emergent. So first of all, we're going to look at annuals. So looking at summer annuals, so germinated in the spring, die in the fall by the first hard frost usually. So for those of you that are more picture learners like myself, there's a nice little picture here on the right that shows that it germinates there in the spring, grows, produces seeds, and then will die there in the fall, usually with that first hard frost. So what are some examples of summer annuals? I'd say the main ones that we're most familiar with are your crabgrasses, your goosegrass, your purslane, knotweed, which is a tough to control weed that really likes those compacted soils, is where we often see knotweed. And lastly, a weed that I've got some questions about that is kind of newer to me and one I really will be highlighting later on is Japanese stiltgrass. So these are just a few examples of summer annuals, like I said.
So Nick, my question to you is, it's great that we're learning their annuals, perennials, summer, winter. I'm assuming that we're talking about it because they're different types of their life cycle is when you're going to actually treat to control it. So you kind of want to become familiar with the life cycle.
Correct. Yep. Knowing the life cycle is really important on when to control and what products to use. So, and that's something we'll dive into. So does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So moving on to winter annuals. So these pretty much have the opposite life cycle as your summer annuals, which germinate in the summer, early fall, overwinter, and then die in spring, late spring, early summer with the heat. So a few examples of these that I commonly think of are mainly just chickweed and henbit. I know from my experience back in the Midwest or Nebraska, you drive in the early spring and there are just fields that are purple. It's that henbit that you see out there. So it's just a very distinct weed and often easy to identify in that spring timing. Lastly, perennials, and then I'm not going to hit on biennials, but be aware that they are out there. The first year, vegetative growth only, and then produces flowers and seeds and then dies. A common example of this one is Queen's Anslays or wild carrot. So perennials are a few examples of those: ground ivy, plantain, clover. As you can see up in the top right here is kind of the demonstration of the perennial growth cycle. So you can see seed, vegetative growth, turns into flower, dormancy, death, and that repeats the cycle year after year. So we have entered time for the first question, Mike.
We're ready to launch our first quiz. Here we go. The quiz is out. You have a minute to answer the quiz. Well, Nick, I think for your first major presentation, you started off well. A good launch.
Good launch. Could be downhill from here, but let's hope not.
I think that the people on the Titanic thought it was a good launch too.
Good point. Good point.
Sorry, that was ruthless. So mean. I also just figured out that folks are sending questions to the question box and not the chat box, because I just saw something that said questions. And I haven't been looking at that box. I've been looking at the chat box for questions. So learning more and more as we go. And so we're a minute in, so we're going to close the poll. And let's see the answers. All right, so 85% of the group got it correct, where they said that the life cycle, it ends when it gets cold out in the first hard frost. So congratulations to all. Nick, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you all. So moving on. So now we're going to kind of dive into some of those common weeds to relate back more so to those life cycles that we just spoke on. So a very common one here, crabgrass. It's kind of what everyone is trying to control with the pre-emergent here coming up in the spring. So like I said, summer annual. This weed spreads by seeds and stolons, and we often see it germinate when the soil temperatures are 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Like I said, summer annual. So there are a few different types of crabgrass. There's smooth, as well as there's hairy crabgrass or large crabgrass. It can also be called. So often the effective control method is going out with the pre-emergent, whether that's barricade, which would be prodiamine as active ingredient, or dimension, dithiopyr, or pendolum, which is pendimethalin. So there are several pre-emergents out there. They all kind of have their own features, benefits, can do a little bit different things, and that's something we'll dive into, especially with a product like Dimension, which is one of Corteva's products. Another weed that is very similar to crabgrass is goosegrass. Goosegrass actually germinates a little bit later than crabgrass, so can cause a little issues when it comes to applying pre-emergents to it. So pre-emergents aren't the only way to control crabgrass. We've all seen it. There is breakthrough. Sometimes the product doesn't get watered into the soil maybe right away. So we do see some breakthroughs. So there are some products out there in the marketplace that you can actually go out post-emergent once it's emerged and apply and get great control. Just a few of them are Acclaim Extra, Phenoxyprop would be the active, and a pretty common one that I'm very familiar with and worked with quite a bit during my master's was quinclorac or Drive. So moving on to another weed, this one would be spurge. So spurge is also a summer annual, reproduction by seeds, very low growing. We see this quite a bit in those landscape beds as well as turf. One dead giveaway for an identification key is that milky sap. I know sometimes that people get confused with spurge and purslane. If you are confused, go ahead and just rip off a stem from spurge and you will see that milky sap. That's a dead giveaway on an identification tool or tip. So really likes compacted soils, much like knotweed. Really likes those compacted soils as well. So you often do see these kind of near those sidewalks or driveways where those are poor soils from construction. There are some control recommendations for pre-emergent, whether it's freehand or dimension or gallery, or actually a new product that I will be highlighting later on in crew, which is a combination of dimension and gallery. So let's say you missed your timing to control spurge. Recommendations for a post-emergent herbicide would be whether it's a standalone product or one of those mixed products, anything that contains sulfentrazone or triclopyr will do the trick on spurge. So moving on to a perennial, oxalis or yellow wood swirl. A characteristic of this, as you can see in these pictures, is that heart-shaped leaf, as well as during the summertime, May, typically through September, you do see those distinct yellow flowerings. Really likes moist, fertile soils. So some control recommendations, anything, once again, that contains triclopyr, whether it's by itself in a product like Turfline Ultra or Ester, or there are several of those combination products out there that triclopyr is in. Fluoxapyr also is a product that has good control on oxalises or yellow wood swirl. So another one that we often dread is those dreaded sedges. So yellow nut sedge is prolific weed, spreads by several different things, as you can see, by tubers, seeds, nutlets. So very, very common. You see these often in very moist areas, maybe some areas, let's say in a landscape bed where water kind of just sits. So you often see yellow nut sedge in very moist soils. So Kalinga is another sedge, classification of sedge. Can handle mowings, flowers from May to October, which is a pretty long time frame if you really think about it. Can completely dormant desirable turf stands quickly, especially in warm wetter weather patterns that we've been seeing up here in the Northeast as of lately. So here's some recommendations actually from Steve McDonald on ways to control sedges. So Dismiss and Dismiss NXT are two great products out there by FMC that work well on sedges. Dismiss itself is better on nut sedge than Kalinga. Vexus, which is a product that PBI Gordon brought to market in the past 2 years, kind of comes in a shaker bottle, so can do some spot treatments. And then lastly, looking at Sedgehammer, which has kind of been a product that's been around for a while, hint the name of Sedgehammer, so it does very well on sedges.
Hey, Nick, if I get to give my vote,
Yes.
for that product, it's Solaro, and then Solaro. And I feel bad for the folks in New York because it's not good. It's not registered up there, but we've had amazing results at 12 ounces per acre for control of Kalinga and sedges, and just phenomenal results.
And you said that's at that 12-ounce rate?
Yep, that's we're seeing it at 12-ounce rate.
Okay, very good. So like I mentioned earlier, this is a weed or a grass that I really wasn't familiar with, but since I took over this territory last September, I've heard from both end users and distributors that they're having a problem and not really much known about Japanese stiltgrass. So it is a summer annual, reproduces by seed. So when doing some identification or looking at it, it does have short leaves, about 1 to 4 inches. And as you can see in these pictures, and we'll see in pictures to come, is those leaves are actually pretty narrow and very bamboo-like. Can grow up to 2 feet tall and weak, shallow roots. So I actually, and I'll go into this, spoke with Dr. Elmore from Rutgers about this because I know he had kind of done some research looking into it. And he said that always thought the conditions or habitat where we often see Japanese stiltgrass was in shaded areas, whether it was like in a forest like where the canopy is covered and gets a lot of shade. However, he said he has seen it in some full sun and can tolerate some regular mowing. So like I said, we're going to dive into kind of a brief small study that he did on Japanese stiltgrass using pre-emergence as well as phenoxyprop, which is a claim, and as well as a combination of a pre-emergent plus phenoxyprop. So here are just some, I apologize, some pictures of more of Japanese stiltgrass. As you can see, it is a weed that grows very close to each other and it can grow up to 2 feet tall. So here's kind of just a closer up of a single Japanese stiltgrass plant itself. I don't know if you're able to see, but like I said, this is from Dr. Matt Elmore, and this is something I actually learned too, as Japanese stiltgrass was introduced to the US as packing material. So it's kind of crazy how some of these weeds get introduced here, and they do provide for significant seed heads. As you can see in this example, it is stuck there in the track of that skid steer. So kind of a close-up picture. So this was back in 2017. What Dr. Elmore was doing with this study was really just trying to evaluate, is there a product out there or products out there that we can combine to control it at what I would call a post-emerge stage using pre-emergence, because he was going out roughly at the time when you'd be going out with your pre-emergent to spray your crabgrass. So as you can see here, kind of it does look like crabgrass at that first true leaf and leaf stage itself when comparing both Japanese stiltgrass and smooth crabgrass. So pretty similar looking. So back in 2017, Dr. Elmore went out and his team, I should say, Dimension 2 EWF, that ½ pound per acre rate, which that is the 2 pints per acre rate, as well as prodiamine at a pound per acre, and then also a tank mix of prodiamine plus phenoxyprop, which is a claim at 9 fluid ounces per acre. So a claim is actually the only product that it is labeled for control. So that is something now. So kind of looking at pictures here, you can see within the plot area, you can really see the Japanese stiltgrass come out, or easy to see compared to the desired turf in this area. So here is a picture of prodiamine alone at that ½ pound. And as you can see that it is still pretty prevalent in this plot area compared to this plot here, where you can really see the distinct line where the product applied in this plot definitely did great control compared to prodiamine in this plot. So here is prodiamine plus phenoxyprop as that tank mix. You can see really the spray pattern where Dr. Elmore and his team sprayed to try and control Japanese stiltgrass, because on the right here as well as on the left is kind of an untreated check where it wasn't sprayed. So you can see throughout where this product or these products were sprayed, the great control that this tank mix provided. Lastly, the last product that he used in this was Dimensioner with the active ingredient of that diapir at that ½ pound AI per acre rate. So as you can see here, it did a great job controlling it, even though Japanese stiltgrass was emerged, so it technically was a post-emergent application. So kind of looking at
a quick question for you. At what stage in its life cycle was it? At what leaf stage? Was it very early?
I believe it was at this like first to second, it looks like here based off of this picture.
Okay.
The reason for that is the timing, because they were trying to line it up with that pre-emergent application timing for crabgrass.
And so Japanese stiltgrass usually emerges, I think, 2 weeks prior to crabgrass seed germination. So If normally May 15th is your crabgrass seed germination time, you're going to have to get this down May 1st, potentially, to control the Japanese stiltgrass post-emergently, as well as control crabgrass pre-emergently.
Correct, Mike. So, yeah, great point. Thank you.
I will say this, we even have now people, because where I live up in the woods in Sussex County, New Jersey, you can see it encroaching from the wood line. So in order to protect their properties, people are actually spraying a barrier of Dithapure into the wood line in order to try to keep it from encroaching in.
Interesting. Are they having good success with that?
There's actually a person on the webinar today, Bob Green, who did it at his residence. He was one of the first people to try it, and he got very good results last year. Did not have a problem with the stiltgrass encroaching. So yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, perfect. So like I mentioned, this was kind of just a short, small study that they did at 2 locations. And Dr. Elmore mentioned that they hadn't published it or put it out there purely because it was just a smaller study, so not a very large sample size. But as you can see, both Dimension alone as well as Barricade plus a claim provided 100% control. Kind of just wrap up conclusion side. Something interesting, I thought that matured Japanese stiltgrass plants can be controlled with the claim at that 20 fluid ounce rate, which is, like I mentioned, which is on the label. So this is a study that we actually did in-house back in, I want to say 2009 with Steve McDonald, back in the Dow Agriscience days before me, looking at to see if our 2 pre-emergent products, whether alone or in a tank mix, could also control Japanese stiltgrass. So what I would look at here is looking at Dimension at that 0.3 pounds per AI, and Dr. Elmore went out at that half pound snow, the 2 pint rate, where this was that 1.5 pint rate of Dimension 2EW. And 90 days after application here, you can see that the cover was about 7.7. So this rating was done on percent cover of the plot instead of percent control like we saw with Dr. Elmore. So they did see about 7% cover of Japanese stiltgrass, which then in results provides about 90% control. So at the little bit lower rate, we are still seeing about 90% control at that 1.5 pint rate, where Dr. Elmore at the 2 pint rate saw 100% control.
Interesting.
So yeah, just another way to look at it, that there are different rates, but I definitely would recommend that higher rate if you do want complete control.
Gotcha. Launching quiz number 2. You will have 1 minute to complete.
Well played.
I thought the music was a nice touch.
I would agree.
All right, pencils down. It's time to review the results. And so, what is the life cycle of Japanese stiltgrass? Is it a summer annual? Is it a winter annual? Is it a perennial? Or is it a biannual? 70% got it right. They picked it out to being a summer annual.
Good. That means they're paying attention, right?
Well, 22% said it was a perennial.
Next time I'll get that number higher.
Yeah, we got to get that a little bit better next time.
You're right. You're right.
Go get him, Nick.
All right, thank you. So jumping into some of the next things. So I know not all of us, or I even still struggle with some of these identification. When you see a weed out there, you're like, what is this weed? So we're just gonna high level talk on some of the identification tools. So 2 resources, I know a lot of people put out posters, as well as this one on the left is one that I've really adapted and really liked. It's an app actually on your phone. It does cost, I'm not quite sure how much it is per year, but you hit the app, you open it, and it takes you to your camera, and you're able to snap a picture of that weed. And within about 15 to 20 seconds, it comes back to you on what that weed is. So a pretty cool little new app that I really recommend if you struggle with some identification. Another great tool, and one I actually use a ton, especially when building out a presentation like this, is what I call the weed manual, which is put out by Purdue University, but there's a lot of other universities that contribute. If you look down here in the blue, you can see Penn State contributes, as well as New Jersey. So all these weed scientists throughout the US that are in academia really contribute. And here on the right, it really lays out nicely. There's several of these charts that show the active ingredient as well as a trade name and how it does on certain plants. So just kind of a nice little tool. It's a book that I carry with me constantly. As you can see, there are some stains, so you can see I definitely get the use out of it. So one I would recommend. And it does come out yearly. I haven't seen the 2021 edition, but this is the 2020 edition that I use. That's really nice. Another great resource, especially if you're out there looking for the soil temperatures on when do I get out those pre-emergent herbicides. Syngenta or Greencast has a really nice one where you put in your location and it kind of gives you a rolling average. So just a few resources out there, as well as one from Cornell that does something very similar. So
they're not only good. Those growing degree gay identifiers are not only great for broadleaf weeds, but also fungicide applications. They take the guesswork out of, okay, when do I go out and apply? And if we're looking at pre-emergent, there comes a point where you may be switching to post-emergent control for some of the grassy weeds, and you have to elevate your rate. It'll tell you, okay, you missed that window, you still get control, but you're going to have to change your rate. So I love.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, that's a great point. Not only just for herbicide application, but for fungicide applications too. So apologize for interrupting you there.
No.
So let's kind of dive into the landscape bed. So, excuse me, I've got weed. What are my options to get rid of them? So looking at hand weeding, so this is kind of just an example that really lays out the cost of hand weeding out there. Let's say it takes about a half hour to hand weed 1,000 square feet. You're paying labor $20, which doesn't include fuel, wear and tear on equipment. You're doing 5 acres and 6 times per year. You can see that hand weeding really adds up. So this is where we believe that a herbicide or a pre-emergent such as Crew, which is a new product we just launched and I'll be highlighting, and really you can really see the cost benefit of using a pre-emergent versus sending your people out to hand weed. So we're gonna nix that one. So another one would be post-emergent treatments, and we're gonna talk about Roundup or glyphosate doing spot treatments. So the Roundup or glyphosate approach is kind of one out there where we've all seen it. You really don't get the complete kill using a product like Roundup. It is pretty labor intensive, let alone is it labor intensive. You really have to trust that applicator because, as we all know, glyphosate can kill anything, even your desired turf for those plants in those beds, as well as dead vegetation just isn't really a great look. And lastly, one thing that's came on lately that we're all aware of is a public perception of using a product like Roundup. So yeah, you can do it, but let's dive into a pre-emergent program and why we recommend that. So building out on why use a pre-emergent program to control those weeds in your turf and landscape bed. Time and labor savings is a big one. Can help ease the public perception because often they're not seeing someone out there or spraying or whatever. We're doing it early and frees up time for other aspects of your business. So when do pre-emergents work well, and how do they work well? If they're applied at the right timing, correct rate is another large one, with appropriate moisture in order to activate these pre-emergents, as well as the chemical barriers not disrupted. Your herbicide of choice is labeled to control the weed you're going after. So some considerations when choosing a pre-emergent herbicide. Make sure you know the label and the use sites. They all vary. Ornamental safety on how many ornamentals you may be able to apply the pre-emergent over. Residual activity could be longer with some versus another. Resistant management. And lastly, cost. Not only consider the product, but labor savers, residual control, which turns into customer retention and keeping those customers happy. So kind of a cool little quote from Ben Franklin. I don't think he meant this when thinking about pre-emergent herbicides, but I think it's worth it. An ounce of prevention is worth about a pound of cure. Kind of shows that if you go out there and do the prevention work, you're going to save money in the long run instead of doing a post-emergent application. So some pre-emergent out there, especially we're going to dive into the ones that Corteva brings to the table, is starting off with Dimension. It is what we consider the foundation of success. It's an oldie but a goodie, and Dimension has some very cool aspects to it compared to some of the other pre-emergents that are in the market. So let's say we're looking at crabgrass, controlling crabgrass in our lawn. So application timing, we say, is usually March through April, sometime in there. I know weather can obviously change and this can move a little bit, but kind of just in a broad spectrum. And then we see by 1st of May that crabgrass germinating. So ideal application, like I said, March, you get it down, you have a great control, but eventually that product's just gonna wear off. However, the nice thing with Dimension is it also gives you kind of that early post-emergent control. So things might get busy here in the spring and you just aren't able to get out there and get your pre-emergent down. The nice thing with Dimension is it does provide post-emergent activity on crabgrass. So this is an example from, I believe, a university out in California, where it actually lists Dimension or dithiopyr as both pre-emergent and post-emergent. I would be wary on listing it as a post-emergent. It is mainly a pre-emergent with some added benefit with post-emergent activity on crabgrass and even Japanese stiltgrass, as we saw earlier. So looking at other herbicides or pre-emergent herbicides, you really have to get them down prior to any kind of emergence or growth. Like I said, the nice thing with Dimension is it does give you a longer application window of 2 to 8 weeks longer to get out there and apply Dimension. So you can apply, so we say up to the first one or first tiller stage. So what does that really look like? We say this constantly. I know I fall in the trap of saying, oh, you get post-emergent up to 1 tiller. But what does that mean? What does that look like? So let's kind of build out here on some pictures on where that first tiller is. So as you can see, emergence is a 1 leaf, 2nd leaf, 3rd leaf, so long. So That first tiller stage is truly after that 5-leaf stage is where we say you can apply dimension up to. Another graphic, just an example of where that first tiller is, and moving on to even the 7 tiller, which is a pretty mature plant where you definitely need a post-emergent in order to control it. So I often get asked, so Nick, what are your recommendations for applying dimension out there on lawns, sports fields, whatever, golf courses? So going out with a single application or split application. I really recommend that split application where the first round you're going out at about a 1/4 pound AI per acre, which would be that 1 pint per acre rate when you're looking at the 2EW. And then following it up 6 to 8 weeks later with another application. So with this application, I would recommend the 1.5 pint application or the 0.38 pounds active as that second application. The reason for that higher rate on the second app is at that rate, you are able to get some good control on that post-emergent. So let's say you had some breakthrough, you're able to go out again with dimension at that higher rate, and you are also getting a little bit longer control. So definitely 2 applications, first app being the 1/4 pound per rate, followed by 0.38 pounds AI as your second application.
Hey, Nick, I hate to interrupt you, but we are starting to get a bunch of questions piling up that we'd like to ask at the end. And so I would like to at least give us 5 minutes. So if you can finish up where we've got 5 minutes left for questions, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, yep. So just quick high level stuff here. Looking at, make sure when you're choosing a pre-emergent, look at the watering and timing. Some are 24 hours, some really don't give a day, and just make sure that we're activating those pre-emergents with watering in. Study done in Nebraska, we could skip over this, but takeaways are dimension at the 1/2 pound rate. When there's no watering in, we're still seeing about 80% control, where with the other products, you do see it drop off when it's not watered in. So next product, Gallery, an old one, a sock spin, over a lot of plants in the landscape beds. Some highlights. All this material that I'm showing here is actually available on our website. So lastly, I want to dive into the new product called Crew, which just came to market last year from Weeds-Corteva Agriscience. So what it is it's a combination of both dimension and gallery. So you are getting both grassy weeds and broadleaf weeds as a pre-emergent, and it comes in, it's actually on a granular, the Verge granular, and is labeled for both turf sites and ornamental sites. So really a border to border spectrum of control. So we have entered the last and final question I have for you guys today.
Launching. Sorry to hurry you up, Nick.
Hey, no worries, no worries.
And so let's talk about Crew right now.
Absolutely.
It has a new granular. What's new about it?
So it's on the Verge technology, which is a new technology that is out there that I know several other manufacturers are using. So it is an SGN 100. The rate for Crew is 150 pounds per acre in the landscape bed, but you can go up to 200 pounds per acre in the turf sites. So we're really pushing that 150 pounds because that way you're able to use it both in your landscape beds and your turf, and you're safe. So that's a really nice thing with this product is it's truly a border to border spectrum in the home lawn. You can put it on turf and in those beds.
And because it's on that Verge prill, it breaks down more readily. So we're not as concerned about maybe phytodegradation of some of the other pre-emergent products that may stick around for a long time and need to get watered off the prill?
Exactly, and that's something that I'll highlight here is you actually have up to 21 days to water in this product. And know that not all lawns have in-ground irrigation or everyone waters their lawn, but there's been studies that this prill itself can sit on top of the soil for up to 21 days and not lose any of that degradation or lose any of that efficacy, I suppose I should say. So that is a very nice benefit, but something to keep in mind, that product's not going to work until it's watered in.
Mm-hmm. So what are the two active ingredients in Crew? The answer is actually Dithapure, which is Dimension, and isoboxin, which is Gallery. So we apologize, the slides went quickly, so you may not have gotten that one correct. Older product that we used to use in the past a lot was it was Treflan and isoboxin, and that would have been your one of your products called Snapshot. So
correct.
Close down this quiz right now.
I apologize. I left you guys out to dry. I didn't say what the active was. I just used the comment.
It's all good.
That's on me.
You're up again, Nick.
All right, back to kind of some broad spectrum of control. As you can see, several weeds that it is labeled for in landscape beds, turf, as well as those grassy weeds. So when kind of comparing this product to some of the other products out there in the marketplace that are similar, just the main takeaway here is when you apply Crew at that 150 pounds per acre, which is labeled for landscape beds at the highest rate, we're seeing over control of 100 weeds, with that being both broadleaf and grassy. If you do bump it up to that 200 for the turf, you do add some more weeds, some of those more difficult to control weeds. So just a broad spectrum of number of weeds for control. Like I mentioned, you have up to 21 days to water it in, so it can wait for rain. However, it will not work until it is watered in. So back with Snapshot, an older product Mike mentioned that was often used, and we're pushing Crew now is Snapshot, which you see you can definitely you have a longer time to water in. Verge granular, low odor, no dust when pouring it into a spreader, and non-staining. So that's another big thing. This is a non-staining product. You're not going to see that yellow out there. Reduces customer complaints. And kind of lastly, just a highlight slide about Crew, non-staining border to border, kind of the main weeds. And then a question I've been getting also quite a bit is, when I put out Crew, what is the active load I'm putting out of each product? So Dimension, you're at that 0.38 of dithiopyr and 0.7 pounds AI of asoxpan of Gallery at that 150 pounds. So that is all I have. I appreciate Mike and everyone at Synatech for asking me to come. I apologize for rushing through. I should have timed it out a little better so we could have highlighted it more, but thank you guys for the opportunity.